Part 3. We are starting out with Lauren co-hosting. I believe Paula M might be joining us later on. But you remember, if you tuned in last week and you saw Paul, everything he said came true overnight. And I've been on the phone with Paul. He's got so much more to say about Prince Andrew and where it's going to go next. So huge thank you for coming on, guys.
Thanks, Shaun, for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think Lauren's been dying to speak to you, Paul. So I'll let Lauren come in with the first question.
Yeah, go.
Paul, I just love whistleblowers. That's what I wanted to start with, because it is because of people like you we know so much now. And the very system you're up against is not only the elites, but the mainstream media, which is a filtering system for them.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think as just a normal person on the ground, I'm just so grateful that people like you have taken a risk to bring us the truth, because we have to, at this point, completely remove what we hear from the mainstream media, because it is not reliable because of the Royal Rota and everything going on. I just wondered, what obstacles have you faced being a truth teller since you spoke out?
Right, so the main obstacle has been my obviously my credibility, because obviously my sort of story came about. I've spoken what happened, you know, and I've taken full responsibility for my actions. I did a lot of bad things, hurt a lot of people. It was selfish, it was cowardly, and I had a lot of time to reflect when I was in prison. 3 years I spent in prison. And when I came out, I made a promise to myself that I would always be honest with myself and others, no matter what. Please or offend, tell it how it is. And obviously, during the court case, I put a lot of allegations, much everything really what I've said up to date about Prince Andrew. It was all in documented form in 2008, and it was served on the prosecution in 2009. So that's 16, 17 years old, yeah? And the prosecution, the Met Police and the Royal Household tried to get that removed from my defence case statement, everything about Prince Andrew. Obviously, at the time, we weren't aware of the Epstein connection and all that sort of stuff. They failed to do that, so it was ingrained into my defence case statement. Also, point of note for anyone who doubts my story and what I've said about Prince Andrew, the ideal time to question anything I'd said about Prince Andrew was in that court trial, because I was delusional. I was guilty, but I went to trial. I shouldn't have done that. But they could have brought other officers to court to basically trash everything I'd said about Prince Andrew. Said, no, this officer's lying, but they never. Why? Because a police officer from Royal Protection under oath would have confirmed and probably added to everything I'd said about Prince Andrew. So I've had that cross, which is a cross I've got to bear, and I understand that and I accept that. So that is the first and foremost thing, the obstacle that I've had to face throughout this many years that I've been saying that Prince Andrew's got questions to answer and he needs to be held accountable. So that's the main thing. But what happened was I went from the pantomime bad guy to all of a sudden the Royal Oracle. When it all started coming out and obviously disgraced Royal Cop, actually, what he said about Prince Andrew is bang on. It's true. Then I got the media attention and then I got the media focus and people started to cherry pick what I had said all them years ago. So what I decided to do was say, listen, if you're going to do that, I'd rather come forward and speak out publicly myself. So it's coming from the horse's mouth. It's not going to be open to interpretation by various parts of the media. As you've said, you can't trust the media 100%. And that's all I've done. I've been consistent. I've not added to my story and I'm not taking away from it. I've been consistent. And unfortunately for Andrew, I'd say 99% of the stuff that I said back in 2009 has come true.
It's interesting because they try to make you look unreliable and they try to discredit you. And there are a lot of, you know, we've seen that happen with Virginia Giuffre. You know, we've seen all of the big hitters go in and say, look, here's X, Y, and Z, why she's not credible. Yet they fail to say that actually Andrew's consistent track record over decades is being a pathological liar. He is incapable of telling the truth. And you're then made out to be not reliable at all, but you are reliable, but you are a problem for the palace, because years ago there weren't outlets like Shaun's channel,
No,
and
that's right.
we were not able to freely find information from truth tellers. I wonder if you can just tell me a bit about the pressure you felt the palace were putting on the narratives when you were talking, and what they did even through your court case to hold back the full truth from us.
Yeah, as I said, they attempted to strike out the evidence that I was putting in about Prince Andrew's bad behaviour. But at no stage, and Michael Gillard, the award-winning journalist who wrote a book about me for Queen and Currency, and we've just done a 8-part podcast which covers all this. He covered the whole case from start to finish, 3 months it was. And they tried to strike it out, and it was in the Times and the Telegraph. They tried to strike this out, and like I said, it was a very telling moment, because we didn't realise what we were stepping into when I did that. I mean, I did it was a street fight. My court case was a street fight, and I knew it would cause a problem for the royal household when I said that, but it was all true. And so what happens is, as well, as you know, there are a lot of reporters that are loyal to the palace because they give them stories. They throw out bits of information for certain royal reporters, Robert Jobson being one of them. Now that man I think he's got 40,000 followers on Twitter. When I did the Prince and the Paedophile, I think it was, with ITV, he went out publicly on, it was either that or 60 Minutes, but he went out publicly on Australian telly and called me out and said I was a criminal, that I was a liar, and all I was a police officer who stood on a gate, right? But had he actually checked what he was saying and thought about it, I've never said anything different. That's where all my information comes from. Me on the gate, letting people in, being abused by Prince Andrew on the gate. You know, I've given one example when we were actually in the palace when he caused us a problem and abused us. But all my evidence was as an officer on a gate, receiving people, letting them in, right? But he was certainly tasked to sent out to discredit me, because they have got a number of people that are loyal to the royal family that are within the press, and they will. A lot of it is when they're doing a defensive story, they'll come up with a source said, you know, a person said. Well, no, it's the palace that are saying it, and you're covering it as a source. And this is what you get. You get smoke and mirrors with the royal household. And years ago, when the Queen was alive, they were a very, very powerful organisation in terms of how they got a grip on the press. When Her Majesty the Queen died, the loyalty started to seep away, because Charles isn't the most popular person in the country to be the king. He's been waiting around, knocking around, twiddling his thumbs for all these years. And in all honesty, he's not the Queen. He never will be, and he will never have the respect that she had. Therefore, the people that are within that machine are not going to stick their necks out on the line as much as they did for the Queen. And we see this now in the way that this narrative has portrayed, and Prince Andrew's being thrown to the wolves.
I spent 20 years in mainstream media, so I 100% understand the cover-ups and the toxicity between royals and media. I mean, a question I've got, and I feel like a lot of people, it's a taboo question to ask, but how much did the late Queen know on this? Because what we're seeing now, I think, is further down the line, or perhaps maybe it's just me, but you start to connect the dots and you see King Charles, you know, incredibly close with Jimmy Savile. You see Andrew very close with Epstein, and you know, then you hear Virginia's harrowing story. How much do you believe she knew, or was it a case of squashing things before it got up to her? How did it work?
So it's very difficult for me to sort of think about that, because if I look at it logically, in my heart, I'm thinking the Queen was the most respected woman on the planet. She served this country all her life, and she died as Queen, right? But the problem I've got is she was the boss, right? As much as people looked at her, oh, she's a sweet old lady, no, she was on point. She was informed of everything that happened. no matter what. At the end of the day, don't forget, if something went wrong and the Queen hadn't been informed about it, on their head be it. All right. So Prince Andrew was a liability, and he was a well-known liability within the royal household. All right. People are now starting to come out and tell their own stories about what an idiot he was, what a bully he was, and all the rest of it. Yeah. Well, the Queen must have known what it was like. And as soon as there was any moment, any hint of a threat to the monarchy in terms of Prince Andrew's done something that could cause damage to the monarchy, right? She would have been all over it. And I find it very difficult to believe that she would not have been appraised and fully informed of potential details of Andrew's potential criminal activity with Epstein, in conjunction with Virginia Giuffre and that sort of stuff through the intelligence sharing with the US. All right. I find it very difficult that Her Majesty and Prince Charles then were not fully briefed by our security services and or the chief of police and or not the Prime Minister in terms of how much damaging information is out there and that could well come forward. And I suspect, and I'm pretty sure, that is why the 12 million or whatever it was pounds was paid to shut this down and make it go away. And as I said to Shaun the other day, the problem was Her Majesty died. So that loyalty, as I spoke about, started to dissipate. And the second thing was, unfortunately and sadly, Virginia Giuffre went from, survivor and champion and beacon of light for abused kids and women all around the world to a victim because she took her own life. And so those sort of combination of things has now brought on a tidal wave of public disdain, but also the information is coming thick and fast. And so I think the palace have got a real problem now, because if it is found, as you just said, did she know, did King know? If it's found that they were fully aware or they were aware of most of what's come out now, then there's the monarchy is going to be a constitutional crisis, whichever way you look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there's a lot of people say it's disrespectful to say anything about the Queen. But I also think, it's our taxes. This is our home. This is our country, people in the Commonwealth. We deserve transparency. And actually, you do not have the deep rot we are now seeing within the monarchy and within the judiciary and the policing without people knowing. It's like an editor of a newspaper not knowing what makes up the pages.
Yeah, I think, look, if we look at it like this, Prince Andrew is a cancer within the royal family that should have been cut out years ago. And what's happened is they've let it grow and grow and grow to the point now where it could be too late. All right, the amount of stuff that's coming out, and that, listen, and again, a testament to what the man is like. We can see from an email, he's used his authority, he's abused his authority in his position to get his protection officer to do illegal checks. And I'll come to that. I'll go through the details because I've been speaking to officers. I think I know what's happened, but so what he's done is he's misinformed the officer. He's lied to the officer about the motives and all the rest of it. The officer has done his report and done the checks properly. Now, here's where the kick is going to come for Prince Andrew. The email suggests that that's what he's done. He's lied. Now, if the officer, I've spoken to colleagues, he was a top drawer officer. I don't know him personally, but some of my colleagues do. And they said, no, they would be very surprised if he's done anything underhanded. He would have followed the book, right? I even said that he would have done that anyway on the Piers Morgan Uncensored, right? But if any information had come back from our intelligence sources to Andrew, and then there's an email going back to Epstein, which is sharing that information, then there's a massive problem there, a massive problem, And I think looking at what's happened, and as Shaun will tell you when we were speaking the other day, things have moved very quick, very, very fast. And he's gone from Prince Andrew to now Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, and they're moving him away from London and sticking him in Sandringham. Now, something's coming, and I suggest he's going to be going to a police station to be spoken to under caution.
Do you think, though, we know as a force, the Met has a very, very questionable reputation and history. And we know that the elites are never, ever held to the same law book as us.
No, 100%.
Do you think what we will see will be something performative, a little slap on the wrist, and then,
Yeah. All right. So if I go through, if I sort of give you what we've been discussing, myself and other colleagues, right? So we suspect, obviously, Epstein's informed him that Virginia's making allegations and it's all going off. He's provided Andrew with details, social security number. What Andrew's done is he's emailed Ed Perkins, is it, the Queen's press secretary, and said and admitted that he's asked his PPO to do checks on Virginia Giuffre. Now, I suspect that Ed Perkins, I'm pretty sure that's his name, was not aware of the relationship between Prince Andrew, Epstein, and Virginia Giuffre, and indeed Maxwell. Yeah. So I'm thinking he's lying to everyone. He's asked his PPO to do checks on an individual who's posing a potential threat to him and is making allegations. Now, what I didn't realise, and when I was there, it was just being formed. It's called FTAC. It's the Fixated Persons, what's it called now? Threat Assessment Centre. Fixated Persons Threat Assessment Centre. And that was based at Buckingham Palace. And what they deal with is online and physical threats to members of the royal family. It's now broadened out, and I've been speaking to colleagues to encompass government figures, because after the some MPs have been sadly murdered, yeah? So what they would have done at the time in 2011, when there was quite a strong unit, quite a big unit that they built up, the officer would have obtained these details from Prince Andrew, legitimately thinking, all right, there's a potential threat to my Prince Andrew. So he would have compiled a report and passed that to FTAC. They would have done an assessment, as a risk assessment, etc., on Virginia Giuffre, bearing in mind she possibly posed a threat to Prince Andrew in some way, shape, or form. All right. Now, that would have entailed doing checks on her using the information that they'd been given by the PPO, who in turn got it from Prince Andrew. Now, those checks would have interrogated UK police computers, IPNC, National Computer, and other intelligence sources that we have in this country as standard procedure. Even though she's a US citizen, doesn't mean she hasn't got a criminal record in this country. The most logical step then is to contact their US counterparts, and I believe that the FTAC unit in America, as I've been told, I might be wrong, but would be part of the FBI, who would deal with sort of likewise threats against people in their country. So there's possibly an email trail plus computer check records of her name being put through our system, and also emails requesting information about Virginia Giuffre to our American counterparts. Now, what we don't know is what information, if any, was passed back to our unit. And if any of that information, if there was information, was that then passed to the PPO, and then he passed it back? And then obviously did that information get back to Epstein via Prince Andrew, which is where this whole mess is going to erupt if that's the case. We don't know that yet, because obviously we've got one part, but we haven't got the other part. If that's the case, then obviously he's dead in the water. And I suspect that something along those lines, given the way they've moved so quickly and the seriousness of the move, by removing his title, which, listen, we're talking about history's being changed here. This is a big thing, yeah? For that to happen, there's got to be something in the offing, and I suggest it's something to do with this.
Do you think it could be a mixture of public outcry and public pressure coupled with more, there's obviously a lot more that we don't know about, without a doubt, because the filtering system at which we get information with is corrupt and toxic. And it is down to brave people like you that are actually telling us the truth. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, look, on this occasion, I think they're trying to hold back the dam, but ultimately it's going to burst. Yeah, they're trying to hold back something that they can't control forever. All right. Now, like I said, the problem we've got is, or the King has got, is if any of that information then becomes available, which shows that he had full knowledge of what we're hearing about now, then this is going to be massive. The way I see it, so we then looked at, when we had this conversation with my colleagues, look at it logically from a police point of view, and also a royal household point of view, damage limitation here. Now, this is a damage limitation exercise that they're doing now with Prince Andrew, yeah? So as information comes out, they're taking a step each time. Now, titles, taking away royal titles and taking away from his big 30-room mansion doesn't affect the man on the street. It doesn't affect the victims of abuse, and child sex trafficking around the world, does it? It doesn't mean diddly squat. What does mean something to him is that Prince Andrew, if he has done anything wrong in connection with Epstein, be it illegal searches he's instigating on our police computer, he is held to account. That is a win for victims, and survivors. All right, that is a win, and that will show that we as a society actually do care. And we as a society, it doesn't matter who you are, if you're in the upper echelons of society, we will come for you and we will take you down. And I think Prince Andrew could be the first of many. If we get this over, the last hurdle in terms of, I think his legal team are probably looking at this now, and the Met Police are just holding on until they're ready to go. And I suspect, and if this doesn't happen, I'll be very surprised that he voluntarily hands himself into a Central London police station. He's interviewed under caution. He may well be bailed, and then I think the charge of some form of deception or misconduct in public office may be levelled at him. I don't think there'll be a trial. I think it'll be a guilty plea, because they won't want a trial, because we've seen how he performs in front of Emily Maitlis. And don't get me wrong, she's a good interviewer, but she's not a barrister. It will get torn to shreds. And so that's what we all believe will happen. The most logical thing to happen. If that doesn't happen, we are going to be very surprised, and we're going to be looking at why he wasn't interviewed, why the no charges leveled. If the officer, who, don't forget, has got 30 years exemplary service, his PPO, I'm sure someone, correct me if I'm wrong if you're on it, that he was willing to give evidence to Congress or something like that, because he's going to be in a position where he's thinking, well, I'm not going to lie, I've retired, I've got a family, I've got a life, I'm going to tell the truth. And so there was a problem there, because this officer could well finish Andrew off and sink him completely. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's doing a good job of it on his own, but this officer could be the key to Pandora's box.
How much more is there that we don't know about in terms of what goes on behind the doors, where, obviously everyone is entitled to live their life, but not when it's harming people, or not when it's with people underage, and not when it's, people like yourself working. And Andrew's treatment of you was utterly disgraceful.
Right. Okay. So I've said it so many times, but it's coming home to roost now. Like, Prince Andrew was no one ever said no to him. He never heard the word no. This is part of the problem, right? And I've always said, and I've said it many, I'll sound like repeating myself again, but if Prince Philip has stuffed a bar of soap in his gob the first time he told a servant to F off, a lot of this might have been different, all right? He's got no respect for anyone below him. He perceives himself to be this, self-entitled. Well, he's a self-entitled moron, but his sense of self-entitlement is unbelievable. And if you couple that sense of self-entitlement with the fact you're absolutely thick and you've got no idea of real life on the outside, he's in a bubble because he's been protected. He doesn't understand right and wrong. He thinks he's going to be right all the time. And he came crashing down to earth on that interview with Emily Maitlis. Yeah. So I've been witness, I'm not going to start dragging other things in, but I've been witness to sexual misconduct from other senior members of the royal household. And it gets swept under the carpet. I've been witness to domestic violence involving staff, which we wanted to take action. And our supervisors went to the head of the household, and then we got the message back, just leave it, let it go. So, things do get covered up. Things do get kicked into the long grass. And us as officers, as much as we want to blow the whistle, but when you're a police officer, there's a massive problem you've got, because you will be vilified, you'll be taken out of that unit, and you're going to have a problem. And not only that, one person, I've always said, I used to complain about, half a dozen times I've complained about Prince Andrew, the way he spoke to us, the fact we had to let all these unknown women in, breaches. What happens if we let someone in? And it happened in Windsor. I spoke to Shaun about it the other day. Same situation. We let we were letting women, we didn't know who they were. Right. And what happens if they go in and something happens? Someone's attacked. It's going to come down onto us, because we're having to break rules. And this is the problem with Andrew. He's broke the rules all his life. Yeah. And now, unfortunately, it looks like he's broke the law in a number of ways. And he has to be held to account. Not only, not for the sake of the monarchy, but he's a stain on the fabric of our society, right? And as far as I'm concerned, the only way we're going to get rid of that stain is air our dirty water in public, and have either a criminal, trial through either this with the unlawful checks on computer, or through a public inquiry. Government ministers have got the power to call a government inquiry in disasters, or if the government done something wrong, and indeed a scandal. Well, if this isn't a scandal, I'm Charlie Drake. You know what I mean? What's going on? He's a senior member of the royal household. He's got himself embroiled with one of the most prolific sex offenders of modern times. Most notorious. Epstein, and this is when he was indeed trade envoy. For UK trade envoy. So we should really be having a public inquiry, not only his private affairs in relation to Epstein and the offences that were committed by him whilst Andrew was visiting, but also his business affairs. Was he lining his own pockets whilst being paid expenses from our public purse? Yeah, there's a lot of things that have come out in Andrew Laney's book, and listen, we should have a public inquiry, but the government for some reason are blocking it.
I think the problem, though, with a public inquiry is we've seen with the grooming gangs that, we still haven't got the inquiry going. And it's now so performative that the government seem completely inept transparency and actually doing the right thing. I wonder, did you see, I like to call her Ain't No Lady, Victoria Hervey, because there's nothing ladylike about that cretin.
No.
But did you see her come through the gate? Because that's very interesting, because she seems to act like a mouthpiece for Andrew, and you never saw her in all those years, which would mean that, she can't have been that close, but is evidently being wheeled out.
Yeah, I think exactly. Like a bit like Mr. Jobson. I think she's another one part of the pro Prince Andrew team that they're using, but she's got no credibility. She's got nothing to say that's relevant. She just talks a lot basically, and none of it's interesting, and none of it makes sense. And as you've said, she's doing the rounds. She's been given airtime, but what is she actually saying? Nothing. Nothing credible. Nothing that can really be tangible and used to disseminate lies from truth. Nothing. But she's getting the airtime because she said, "Oh, I went out with Prince Andrew once." She probably just bumped into him at a party, and that apparently to her that was going out.
I wonder, with the women that you saw coming through that you had to let through, did they look like they could have been escorts, ladies of the night, or did they look like a group of friends coming through? Can you talk us through what kind of things you saw?
Yeah, I mean the ladies that came in, they look well to do, smart, people keep saying to me, "Oh, you letting underage." I didn't let any underage girls. I have to keep mentioning this. I know I shouldn't have to, be baited by idiots who can't understand when I'm telling the truth. But none of them ever looked to us like they were in their teens. They're all 20s upwards, right? I know people say, "Oh, but they can make themselves look older." Well, like, to me and to my colleagues, there wasn't any that looked underage in terms of below 20. That's the first thing. And the second thing, and also I've got to say, if I was vindictive, I'd be saying, "Of course they were. Of course they were." I'm not. I'm standing by my guns and saying the facts, what I believe. Yeah. But they were all well to do, although we didn't know who they were. There was one incident that I've mentioned. I put this in my defence case statement. This is going back 2008, so this is old news, and I've put it on tweets. 2019, I think I put them. There's one incident that occurred. Obviously, the running joke with royal protection officers was Andrew should have a revolving door in his bedroom. The amount of women that are going in and out, yeah. And so an interesting thing, actually. All right, I'm not saying they were escorts, but we never really saw the same one twice. So there weren't regular. Oh, hello, and you get to a rapport like the Queen would have people come in with none, because you know what I mean. These were women we wouldn't see more than once. That did stick out to me.
That's strange.
But there's one occasion where it was late. It was either 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and we got a call from the control room that Purple 41's got Prince Andrew, that's his code name, Purple 41. Well, there's two lady guests will be arriving shortly in a black taxi. you're not to stop the vehicle, you're to show it. Because at the time, I remember as well, two things. One, the North Centre gate. So that's, if you look at the front of the palace to the right, that's where exit and entry for all visitors goes. But the gates were being repaired. So we're at the South Centre gate, which was on the other side, adjacent to Buckingham Gate, yeah? And we were told, yeah, don't stop the taxi, just let it go straight into the South Centre arches. And then obviously his door is literally there, the Duke of York's door, where his private entrance. But obviously we thinking, well, we are going to stop it, because we don't know, it might not be the taxi, it might be some nutcase, there might be someone holding a gun to the man, so we don't know, so we're going to have to stop it. So we stopped it, and there was two young girls in there, and they were scantily clad, dressed, so they were very, very, had, you know, left a lot to the imagination, low cut tops, very short skirts, you know, heavy makeup, drinking out of cans of Coke. And we remarked, we said, listen, bearing in mind, I've said to you, the kind of ladies we've seen coming in, these two are a complete contrast. Yeah, they were giggling, they were laughing, didn't really say much, drinking out from cans of Coke. So we just looked in and let them go. Then my colleague, who was a bit older than me in terms of service at Buckingham Palace, he said, oh, they look like a couple of Chelsea Harbour Club girls. And I said, well, what's that? He goes, prostitutes, high-class prostitutes. I went, no. And for, you know, up until recently, when I read Andrew's book, I was doubting myself. I was doubting it. But what happened was it went off, and all the police officers now believed on duty that night that Andrew's got a couple of Tom's prostitutes in the palace. So we told the control room, because we were nosy, to let us know, give us a shout when the exit is in his private apartment, so we can all go down and have a look at the side gate, the side door, which is where they'd exit. So about an hour later, bang on an hour, we get a call from the control room. Two females are exiting Purple 41's apartment. So 20 coppers all run down to the side door like as emergency, and waiting eagerly to see these two prostitutes that everyone now believes are, but it's just because that's what people are like, you know, just bored and all the rest of it. Anyway, what he didn't tell us was Prince Andrew was with them, escorting them down, which is again rare, because usually he'd send his footman down with, once, you know, the females left, they would come down on the run with a footman and he would show them out. But this time Prince Andrew was with them. So we all ran and hid, because we didn't want him obviously asking why there's so many officers down in the side door. And what he did was, which is again even more strange, was he went out of the palace onto the road, onto Buckingham Gate, and stood on the side of the road with these two females and waited with no protection, which is unheard of. Waited with no protection for about 10 minutes until he saw a taxi, waved the taxi down, put them in it, and they went. So there was no opportunity for us to say hello and strike up a conversation with these two individuals. He waited until they were gone, and then he went back into his apartments. Now, that is unheard of, you know, and given what I know now about, you know, allegations of prostitutes in Thailand, 40 prostitutes and stuff like that, and other things that have come out in the book by Andrew, are balanced based on the balance of probabilities. And bearing in mind, I used to work in that area, and I know the red light district, obviously, as a police officer. They, now thinking about it, they were dressed as if like they were on the red light district, you know, down the Edgware Road. So I now, on the balance of probability, believe they were prostitutes, high-class prostitutes, which is a very sad thing, really, because he's disrespecting, you know, the Queen, you know, and the titles and all the rest of it. But now we know what a scumbag he is. Nothing surprises me.
Yeah, and then has the audacity to, as trade envoy, you know, use our tax money, fly over, you know, use those work trips to actually do nothing within his role that he should, but just spend our money while we're working
100%.
like donkeys, you know, trying to save up for Christmas all year. And he's behaving in this way. And I think what's really interesting is, for me, from a PR sense, very much how the palace or the elites and the palace have spun this is that, you know, Andrew's got fragile mental health. Virginia Giuffre is unreliable. Andrew has, you know, dedicated himself to his country. And we seem to be in a position where, you know, on the whole, when you challenge this narrative, you are now, they weaponize you with, you're trying to bring the monarchy down. It's like, no, I want to know what my tax money has been used for. And I also want to know, Paul, you know, what people like you, who are good, hardworking people, you've been put in very awful positions in the line of duty, which I think is grossly unfair by Andrew, you know?
I mean, to follow on when the story, the information I gave in my interviews about we had to let unknown females into the palace. You know, we didn't know who they were. Clear breach of security, because we do get, you know, mentally challenged people that turn. And I said this the other day to Shaun. They turn up at the front of the palace. So I'm here to see the Queen. Yeah, no, you're not. You know, they believe that they've got an invite to the Queen to have tea with the Queen, right?
Yeah.
So Andrew, this was only happened a few years ago. Andrew was at Windsor in his lodge, and a female turns up to the front of the lodge in a taxi, gets out, approaches the two royal protection officers and says, I'm Prince Andrew's fiance, and I'm here to see him. So if you've seen my other interviews, you know what the standard procedure was: let them in, otherwise we're going to get a tirade of abuse from Prince Andrew. So we would let them in because we know what was coming. We've already been abused by them and threatened by them if we dare to stop these individuals. So those two poor officers have done what we would have done. Their counterparts in Buckingham Palace did, just let her in. I think one of them even paid her taxi fare, right? So she's gone in, wandering around his private lodge. He could have bumped into her at any time. Then they've realised that she's mentally challenged, that she's not his fiance, and had to run, and luckily they detained her before, you know, they come across each other. But that was a massive security breach. She could have had a knife, a gun or anything and killed him, you know. And the point being is those officers were not at fault, but they were, because, you know, they were coerced, and they were unduly coerced by threats and all the rest of it. They've broken the rules, technically, whichever way you look at it. You know, and I felt for those officers, and I come out publicly and defended them at the time. I said, listen, that's happened at Buckingham Palace. It's not those officers' fault, because they'll end up pounding the beat in Brixton the next day. So that's a clear issue. And also, he misused police officers, not only in that way, but I've said sometimes he would have his PPOs drive these unknown women home, you know, from Buckingham Palace. That is not a police officer's job. We're there to protect the royal family and from threats and stop anyone from getting in. We're not there. We're not a taxi service to drive his, you know, his bits of fluff home, as you want to call it. We're there for a job. So that's misuse of a police officer. And then picking up golf balls, for crying out loud. You know, one of his PPOs, I was out in the garden. You've heard it so many times. And his turned his protection officer, a highly trained officer, into a ball boy. I mean, come on. You know, this is how he regards his people that are there to protect his life. So you can imagine how he treats other people. In fact, you've probably heard the story. The maid was called up 3 flights of stairs into his personal apartments just to shut his curtains, and he was sat right next to him. Right, all on record. This is. So we're getting a picture, and that's all I've ever said. I just want people to know the kind of man he is. Because all we see is the ribbon cutting and the saluting and the flag. Yeah. You know what I mean? When they're on doing these different openings and, you know, and all this. But when they're off duty, I've seen the real Andrew, and that everyone has, you know. So all those years of me saying it and people doubting me, now it's come home to roost. And as far as I'm concerned, I've been vindicated. Everything I've said has come true, and he is a monster. And now people have seen it, and now we've seen the late reaction. It's too little, too late. I said on CNN the other day, he asked me about, you know, did the king do the right thing? I said, I think it's too little, too late, to be fair. So we're all going to see where this goes, but there's a lot more to come, and I think we're going to find out even more, you know, how awful this man is. And I call him a man because he's not a prince. You know, He's just Andrew Mountbatten Windsor now. And that's a better ring. That's a better ring. But I think the next title he'll probably get, hopefully, will be defendant. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean that would be amazing. How much did you see Ghislaine Maxwell when you were there?
Yeah, I saw her on a frequent basis. She was a regular visitor, and as I said, she had the run of the palace. So she would, in effect, was never stopped. She was a bit like part of the royal family. We'd see the car. It was a green Range Rover she had. Sometimes she'd be driven in it by a chauffeur. Sometimes she'd be driving it herself. As soon as we saw the car, we just let her in, and she'd go straight into the quad, into Andrew's, you know, private apartments. And as I said, you know, look, the picnic was started off when we saw him having this intimate picnic in the back garden, very lavish picnic. And then from there on, my attention was drawn to her. And then, as far as we were concerned, myself and my colleagues, they were in some form of intimate relationship. bearing in mind the amount of women we've been letting into this man, in for this man. And now all of a sudden he's got this, Maxwell was visiting him on a regular basis. So we just thought it was another one of his, conquests.
Define regular. How regular?
I'd say at least see her once a week. But don't forget, I was on different shifts. So other officers would have seen her as well. One of my colleagues told me, this is from him, and I trust him. He had 30 years service, unblemished record. She came into the palace 4 times in one day.
Wow.
So, yeah, she was a regular to the point where, as I said, we came to the conclusion, because she was in so regular, once, twice a week, whatever. If I was on an early turn or late turn, I'd probably see her twice a week, say. And then, so from that basis, she was just like, there was no one else had access. Let's put it this way. No one else had that kind of access. She didn't have any ID. Even household staff, even though they've been there years, would still have to present their ID to us.
Wow.
Yeah. But she would have access, but she had no ID, but we would just have to let her in. So the rules were completely different for her. Completely.
I found recently some pictures of Ghislaine's father, Robert Maxwell, with the royals. And you just think it runs deep.
Yeah.
The story that's always spun is just utter rubbish. They think we are born yesterday.
Yeah. I mean, don't forget, that interview that Prince Andrew done all those years ago, they should have got a grip of it and said, listen, we need to do something now. But they didn't, because the Queen was still alive. I think they thought they could stay still. Well, they did have the power to pattern it out and, calm it down. But obviously, like you said, I think they think we're peasants and we're stupid. And this is the problem they've got, because they live this life of luxury, and everywhere they go someone's bowing and scraping and this, that and the others, and and they think that we are just simple people and that we should not have the cheek to question anything that they are involved in. Well, listen, I agree with what your family business is none of my business, in terms of if you have a row with the Queen or whatever, your wife, that's none of our business. But when you're on the public payroll and then something's happening and then we find out you've been abusing your position in so many ways, then it is our business. Yeah. I mean, Prince Andrew used to use the royal helicopter to go and play golf, because we used to see him coming out in the garden with his golf bag, throw up his PPO, obviously carrying that, putting it in the helicopter, and he'd fly off under the guise probably that he was doing something for the UK trade, as UK trade envoy, but he was going to play golf in the royal helicopter. What's that all about?
Paul, I'd like to introduce you to Paula M., our senior royal correspondent, who's just joined us.
Hello,
hi, how are you
Paul.
doing?
I'm doing well,
Hello.
thank you. I've been watching your interviews, and there was one comment you said, I think it was in 60 Minutes, where you said they asked you if you would remember whether Virginia was there or not, and you said, well, something like, at the moment probably we wouldn't, because it was such a long time ago, and we were mostly focused on Andrew. Yeah. And it kind of brought it home for me how dispensable these people, not by you, but how dispensable these ladies were, that nobody would remember them. And this is the thing that a lot of the victims have to fight against, because also you mentioned that and you guys are tough, a lot of the police protection officers don't want to come forward because they're scared of what's going to happen afterwards. So if this is you guys, that you are in the police, who are scared of coming forward, how people don't understand how the victims feel. Yeah, it's worse.
It is, and it's I think that the victims in this case have been marginalised, not only by the press, by royal family, and also members of the government. They've been marginalised. Yeah, they should be the focus of everything about the Epstein scandal. They should be the focus. These are the people that have been damaged. Yeah, they've been abused, and as far as I'm concerned, you've got survivors, which are those people that have been abused, that managed to get their life back together and managed to get through life and have kids and have a sort of a semi-normal life. A victim of abuse is someone who doesn't get that chance, who isn't that strong, unfortunately, who turns to drugs, who turns to crime. And I've met them in jail. I've met them. They've told me their stories. And abuse, their childhood abuse, and has led to them, life of crime. And then there's unfortunately the victims who who don't even make it that far and have to take their own lives. Unfortunately, I'm putting, Virginia in that category, which is very sad to say. But it's, as far as I'm concerned, the pressure that she was under, as you were saying about, victims, is what I think drove her to, take her own life. Unfortunately, and I said on CNN that as far as I was concerned, that Virginia's death, although Epstein, Maxwell and Prince Andrew weren't directly involved, with her death, they bought the ticket, because at the end of the day, you look at what the woman has gone through. And I know there's people taking her story to bits and some of it might not add up and all the rest of it. But listen, she's a truth teller, all right? And whatever part of her story they don't think true is, Prince Andrew paid £12 million, yeah? And I believe that he did sleep with her, as far as I'm concerned, 100%. 100%. And when I did my interviews in 60 Minutes, I said that I only go by the facts, right? I'm not going to deviate and speculate. But given what's come out now in evidence in relation to the dishonesty of Prince Andrew and what he said, what has been found to be lies, complete lies, based on the probabilities, including testimonies in the book entitled by Andrew Lowney, I'm of the opinion that Prince Andrew did sleep with Virginia Giuffre, 100%.
I have to ask you something, because I saw your interviews and a lot of times you were saying that, for example, you broke protocol or security breach or whatever by not including the name. So you really have no idea who was coming in or out, which is insane.
Exactly.
2 questions. What would have happened if one of these people had harmed the Queen or any other people there? Because I assume that once they get in, they have free access to the rest of the place, number 1. And number 2, if you, as a police protection officer, had seen Andrew breaking the law, harming a girl, what would have been your reaction? Would you have been empowered to stop it, or just
100%?
The other way?
Yeah, 100%. Listen, as far as I'm concerned, our role when we join the police is to protect the public, all right? And that's the first and foremost. If I'm an old school police officer, so my remit was protect ordinary decent people and terrorise the criminals. Yeah, and so if we had seen Prince Andrew in any way, shape, or form abusing or assaulting a female, then he would have been dealt with the same as any other scumbag doing that. Yeah, I know the emphasis is on, look, would we have done anything? But I personally, and I know my colleagues would have done. I'm not saying that there were not police officers in that unit that may well have turned a blind eye, because there were officers in there that were loyal, were 100% loyal to the royal family. And I've got officers that have called me out for speaking out online, and so. And I've said, how can you defend the indefensible? You was a police officer, all this nonsense about you signed an NDA. Listen, that went out the window as soon as I saw Andrew bullying staff, and terrorising people. And no, sorry, we've got to call it for what it is. The man's a bully, he's a deviant, he's a liar. All of it's been proved, all right? And so that's the first point. Although I've dealt with the second point first, now I'm going to go to the first point second, right? So, yeah, as you said, and I just gave an example about officers letting in a female who was mentally, unstable. That could have ended up in exactly what you said. Someone could have got harmed because of Andrew was such a bully. And this is what I have to emphasize to people, right? They said, you should have done this, you should have done that. We made complaints, but no one was going to go to the commander because they would have just said, look, get lost. Yeah. So we did make complaints, but no one, he was the Queen's favourite. So, who's going to go to the Queen and say, you need to reel him in? Because she'll say, really? Off you go. That's the problem you had. It was a very archaic system. They had three canteens, restaurants in the palace. This is it's like upstairs, downstairs. When you join the Royal Protection Command, right, your remit now is... Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry, 2 seconds.
I am so glad it's not Siri.
Sorry.
I'm so glad it's not my dog this time.
my wife's gone out. She's left me with a moody 13-year-old daughter and 5 chihuahuas. So that was about to go wrong.
No, I'm so glad it's you, not my dog this time.
They'll probably start yours off. I've lost my train of thought now. Where was I?
We're talking about damage. If somebody gets in the palace and then they have free access and something like that happens, like that mentally unstable lady.
Yeah, so basically, she got in, and then so that could have gone wrong for those officers. So at the end of the day, what we're saying is he's got us over a barrel. But that problem would have come back to the officers. But Andrew, I've said, I think I said it the other day. He's that type of man. He would ring up the commander, the Royal Protection Commander at home, and verbally abuse him down the phone when we did something wrong. He didn't care who it was. You'll get a roasting. He would F and blind at you. It was, so he was a bully from the top down. So it wasn't just like PCs or officers on the ground. He would bully the hierarchy of the Royal Protection Command. So there was nowhere really for anyone to go. If you didn't like it, then go back to division. But it's a bubble. When you go in there, so this is my point before my dog started barking. You walk in there. So when I said to you, my priority is to protect the public, yeah, and prevent crime. When you go in through that doors into the Royal Protection Command, you're now going into a different world. Your remit now, and you will be told that, is to protect the Queen and the rest of the royal family. Your remit is not to be proactive in terms of looking for crime on the outside. You only deal with what is in this palace confines. Yeah, that is your loyalty. Now, so you're not loyal to the public as such in terms of you're not going to go out arresting people. Your focus is on protecting the royal family no matter what. Yeah, and I remember, I'll give an example. I first went on the unit, and I've just fresh off the street, nicking robbers, rapists, bad guys, and I've turned up to this unit. So I've still got a sort of bug in me to, being a police officer and practice. And we were doing a armed mobile patrol around the palace, and we spotted a car. And bear in mind, we're SO4 in Royal Protection, and I spotted this car, and I put my blue lights on to stop him because he was acting suspiciously. It ended up in a chase, right, around Buckingham Gate, around the palace. He's gone for a set of red traffic lights and T-boned the car, smashed the car up. He tried to reverse into us before we had the chase. He tried to smash into our police car. Anyways, crashed the car. As he's fell out the car, a massive knife has fell out with him. We was about to draw our weapons, but luckily we managed to get to him and restrain him before he could reach the knife. Otherwise, we would have probably shot him. So it was a good arrest. He turned out he'd stolen the car. He burgled a woman's house in Northampton up north. He'd stolen the car. He was on drugs, and he was wanted for various offences, and he'd come down to London to rob somewhere, rob a shop or something. So the next night, I'm on duty. The inspector calls me over and he says, "Paul," he goes, "if you want to do things like that, go back to division. Your remit is to protect the royal family, not to go and do things like that." So instead of a pat on the back, I got told, "Listen, if you do that again, you're off." Yeah. So that's the sort of.
So you are encouraged. You are encouraged not to protect the public. You're literally like private for the royal family. And
your priority is the royal family. They say, they say it publicly. Oh, if you see a crime committed, you can dive in. But privately, they're frowning. They're saying, don't do things like that.
I ask you because I'm here in Toronto right now, and I know that Andrew used to stay at a very nice hotel here, and there was an incident in September 2013 here in Toronto. I don't know if you're still with the Royal Police Protection Officers. No. And a lady, he was supposed to stay the whole weekend, but he ended up leaving earlier because there was an incident with a lady that was brought into the hotel that she had to be she wasn't feeling well, and she left around 2 a.m, and they took her out, and it was hush hush, and he ended up leaving earlier. But that was covered up. I was surprised that that's not out in the public domain, and people are still scared to come out and talk about it. So in many ways, the police protection officers are covering up the crimes, and they're not reporting this.
Yeah, a lot of it, as I said, the close protection officers are in a rock and a hard place with Prince Andrew because they're with him all the time. And as I've said to you, that the way he is, that's a really crap detail to get looking after him. You're looking after a man-child at the end of the day, and so that's a pretty tough job. And look, did they break the rules? And look the other way. I don't believe they would have done if there was any sexual impropriety. They were professional officers, at the end of the day. But did other things happen? They've obviously driven women home they shouldn't have done, and bits and pieces like that. Yeah, probably. As I said, listen, the royal household is a law unto itself, and so I'll give you an example. Actually, this is a good one. So in 2002, I think was it the Royal Jubilee? I was there when they had the party at the palace, and you had all the rock stars there. I think Brian May was playing the guitar on the top of the palace and all that. And they had all the musicians at the back of the palace. The Bee Gees were there. You know, loads of you know, top drawer people, and they cordoned off with all like fencing the area where all the artists were within the palace. So us as police officers weren't able to get in there as such. We could patrol around, but the household told us just let them get on with it. Well, the amount of plumes of cannabis smoke coming from this tent, coming from this fenced off area was unreal. You know, we were getting high just smelling it. The amount, you know, it was so. We made complaints, we were told to ignore it. And a comedian, I'm not going to say his name, but there was a British comedian, and he was very famous at the time. And he was asked to come in to do a bit. He was part of it. He was involved in the celebrations, but he had to have checks done on him. So when you come in, you have to pass your details over. It turned out that he was wanted on warrant for non-payment of fines, right? So he should technically have been arrested and taken to the local police station, and that's sorted out. But we were told by the household, that's to him, don't do that, that's embarrassing. So he was quietly spoken to and told to go away and sort the matter out and come back, which is what he did.
Oh, wow.
So when we're talking about, you know, one rule for them and another rule for us, that was a sheer, you know, officers had to turn a blind eye for that, as well as the drugs. If that was out on the street, we'd be getting the big red key and putting the door in and finding where the drugs were, you know. But because we're in the palace confines, those sort of things we just have to let go. So yeah, you know, it was an unhealthy sort of place. When we look at it, you know, sexual impropriety by other senior members of the royal household. I'll give you a few examples. Don't know if you've heard them, but I'll tell you again. One of the Queen's senior advisors, we were on night duty at the front of the palace one night. He comes along drunk. He'd been out for the night. He comes up, he goes, "I've just been assaulted and my briefcase has been kept in the club down the road, and you will go and get it." That's how he spoke to us, like shit, pardon my French. "You will go and get it." So we went, "No, we won't." So obviously he was clearly worse for the wear for drink. Said, "No, we won't be going anywhere." He goes, "Yes, you will, because I said, "Listen, we won't be going there, go home, sod off." So anyway, he kept making a nuisance of himself. So we called the inspector up, and the inspector came out and obviously recognised who he was, one of the Queen's personal advisors, and basically said to us, what had happened is he got himself into a lap dancing club off of Piccadilly somewhere, and he touched one of the waitresses inappropriately, and the bouncer had given him a slap and thrown him out, and rightly so, you know. And but what had happened is they'd thrown him out, but he didn't get his briefcase back. And what happened was the inspector said, "Well, the problem we've got is he's now telling me there's secret palace papers in this briefcase." So now once he said that, we're stuffed. Had to go and retrieve this briefcase from this club. And we spoke to the bouncers and said, like, "What's happened?" And they told us, like, he touched one of the waitresses, sexually assaulted her. So I said, "Well, do you want to make a complaint?" He went, No, we get it all the time. Unfortunately, sad to say, he said, "You'll get it all the time." So that could have been an issue there. So we retrieved the briefcase and took it back, and no more was said about it. So that's one incident. Another senior, and this, you know, he must have been in his late 40s. Yeah, this fella. And so he's hanging around those sorts of clubs. He wasn't a youngster, you know, finding his feet in the world. He was a you know, meant to be someone as senior official, and he's doing that sort of stuff. The next one was a colonel, retired. I'm not going to mention him, but he was one of the Queen's, again, personal advisors. And he had his wife and he had 2.4 kids, you know, and he'd have the country pub. He had a grace and favour apartment at St James's Palace, where the King now lives. But he was one of the Queen's personal secretaries, again, advisors. And so he's got his wife and his kids over at St James's. And like I said, the weekend, they'll go down to their mansion and he'll go shooting and all the gentry stuff, colonel, this, that, and the others. But what we found out was, what happened was, he was having an affair with a young staff member who was about 22. And he's got to be in his 50s, right? And it all come on top. The Queen found out, and she, as punishment, she held his knighthood back for a year, right? And so, you know, there has been other sexual impropriety within the. So when you think about it, you've got these type of sleazebags wrapped around the Queen, and then who's gonna say anything about Prince Andrew? Because it's only going to go to them, you know. Yeah. So. It's a strange place, and I've always said, you know, it's not normal life in there. It's a weird setup. It's a weird setup. People will never understand it. They will never
It's a
understand it.
rarefied environment. I have worked with royal households. I used to actually organize the security part. And I wanted to ask you about this on the security part, because one of my remits, one of my jobs I had, basically when royals had to go abroad from different households, not the British, we would vet things. We would vet people in advance. This is why, for example, that idiot Harry doesn't understand that he has to give notice in advance, because there's a lot of things that are in place. It's not he's just going to pitch up to the place, you know, especially abroad. You were given an interview, and you were, when Andrew, for example, went to see Epstein in New York after he had been convicted. And the same thing for Fergie, because Fergie took the girls, or the women, her daughters, to see them. I am surprised, because I saw in that interview that you said that he would have been flagged, rightly so. And other members, for example, of other royal households that I work with would have never gone there. And the government themselves would have not allowed it to go there. But why was he allowed, in spite of the fact that it was flagged? Where was the government holding the reins, or saying, no, you can't do this? Because at the end of the day, the monarchy represents, it's an institution. So the current royals holding the titles are soiling basically the institution. Where was the government saying you can't do that?
No, 100%, you're right. I mean, look, it would have been flagged up. The checks would have been done on Epstein's premises. Like I've said, I'll quickly go through it again. So we've got a foreign and domestic travel office within the Royal Protection Command. They deal, as you said, with any movements, both private and official engagements. They will then obviously they will liaise with the local police forces in this country or abroad, wherever these roles are going, whether it's private, as I say, or official engagement. So they would have obviously had to give. He's a senior member of the royal household, so he's not going to fly off and disappear. No one's going to know who it is. So it's all, like you said, it's going to be processed and it's going to be looked at and it's threat assessed, right? So Andrew would have had to give the details of Epstein's premises and who he was going there with, and obviously the checks would have been done with their counterparts in the US, and it would have flagged up these premises in case it's Russian owned or Chinese owned or something like that, and it could be a problem. And it comes back to a convicted felon, Epstein. So that information, if it was not already known by command, would now be in our possession. And then obviously the next conversation with Prince Andrew is this is not a good idea to be staying with a convicted felon. It could be a potential security risk, but obviously what they'll be looking at as well whilst over there, where the nearest hospital is, where the nearest police station is, and all those things. So it's a very detailed thing. So when it's moved, it's all organised. So that would be the main thing, is the security surrounding where he's staying. Yeah. So you're right, because I think the security services, I think in this Epstein madness, has got questions to answer. I mean, what did they know? When did they know it? Why did, as you said, you said the government technically probably wouldn't have been aware of Andrew's visit at the time. But don't forget, Peter Mandelson was at the heart of the government as well, and he was best friends with Epstein. Yeah. So he was another one caught with his pants down, literally, because obviously the emails exploded and he suddenly rolled out the woodwork,
just to make a break, because I'll forget. You said that the government would have not known, but wouldn't the security? This is one thing. Wouldn't the police protection officers would have notified their superiors that Andrew was flying over, and the government, and then there's somebody in government must have known, because you have police protection officers funded by the taxpayers that are going over there, and they have to know. Somebody had to be informed, and they allowed this to happen. I mean,
no, you're 100% right. So I think obviously the British embassy in America, the consulate, would have been made aware that Prince Andrew's coming over for a trip. Now, what the thing is, the discussion would have been, so the checks would have come back, a report would have been compiled for this trip, and obviously they would have flagged up any threats, any issues that could be potentially arise on this trip, right? Obviously, front and centre, Epstein, convicted felon, right? So that information being passed to the commander of Royal Protection and said, look, there's a problem here. And then there probably would have been a meeting with Prince Andrew, high-level meeting, and probably one of the members of the senior household potentially. And Andrew said, well, I'm going. He's overridden it. There's no other way around it. He's overridden it. Because if someone had told me he wasn't going, for example, if the Queen had known or whatever, she probably would have said, no, you're not going. Obviously, within the government, like you said, the embassy, the consulate would have known. Would they have got the report? Probably. Would they have made their obviously, they've made it known what they thought? Yes. What did Andrew think? didn't care. Hence why the visit happened. You know, it's again, we come back to, I went there to say goodbye to him, the honourable thing to do, right? Well, we now know that's a lie. He's gone over there because it's all coming on top, and he thinks he's going to be in the frame. Something he's done is might come to light, and he's gone over to Epstein to see, you know, what the actual score is and how deep he's in the pup. That's what he's done. You don't go to visit a convicted. You don't risk, you know, the kind of damage that he's caused in the position that he's in as a senior member of the role for nothing. Yeah, it must have been a very, very serious conversation he needed to have with Epstein for him to risk the reputational damage that's happened on that visit with those photos. It's clear. And as we've seen now with the evidence that's coming to light, something very, very wrong has happened with Epstein in the relationship with Epstein. You know, what's gone on, we don't fully know yet, but whatever it is very serious indeed. So hopefully, you know, more will come out. But for that, as you said, there are going to be people in the government within the security service, I suggest, that would have known what's gone on. And there must have been reports, because he was trade envoy, UK trade envoy, A, and B, he was a senior member of the Ross household. So he could have been subject to blackmail, threats, kidnaps. So there must have been a constant stream of intelligence around him and not only his business activities, but his personal activities, to make sure that he's not getting himself involved with anyone that could compromise him and the state. Yeah. But then, unfortunately, what we've also got is the Chinese connection. You know, and that was flagged up far too late by the intelligence services. So what were they doing? You know, were they sitting on their hands? So I think that the intelligence services, MI5 and MI6, are going to have questions to answer. If it comes to a public inquiry, I'm pretty sure they're going to be in hot water as well. So yeah, there's a lot of strands to this. There's a lot of people going to be affected, and I think that's why I think they're going to try and minimise the damage, throw Andrew to the wolves, and hopefully close that down. But will that happen? Potentially, because, you know, there's a lot of people that could be damaged with this. It's serious.
Paul, I've just got two questions before I go, because I've got to sort my kids out. But I'm dying to know, Freemasonry. I know this is a bit off topic, but we know the royals have a long history with Freemasonry. Yeah. Did you see anything regarding that behind palace walls? Because it's my belief that Freemasons have frequently stood in the way of justice and for victims, and also have infiltrated so many different organizations like the police. And I think it's a real concern. So I wondered, did you see anything relating to the royals and Freemasons?
Well, it's funny you should mention that, because it's not off topic. It's actually bang on topic. I've mentioned that in interviews and they've been cut. The connection with the Freemasons within the police and close relationship with the Masonic Lodge in the royal household. And the interviews that I've done, they've edited them out, right? It is a very pertinent topic, which and I believe it is part of the problem. Okay, so when I went to royal protection, I was brought in there through the Masonic, for people that were on the Masonic Lodge, were in the lodge, yeah. So I got in, I was given all the answers to the questions that I was going to be asked on my interview. I was given the pictures of the roles that I was going to be asked to identify before the interview. So the civilians that were on my interview board didn't realise that the officers, the sergeants, had already given me all the answers to the questions. So I went in and I passed with flying colours. Yeah, they probably thought I was a stalker. But the point being is that a police officer, if you're a Mason in the Masonic Lodge in the Royal Protection Command, you're probably earning £20,000-30,000 more than an officer that isn't. You get all the plum jobs. You get to go to Scotland where the money is. You get courses. And a lot of the 14-2 officers would have been Masons. Would have, if they weren't Masons when they went on that, they would have been brought into the Masonic Lodge. Yeah. Now that is closely linked to the Royal Household Masonic Lodge. And what happens is a lot of them, when they retire one day from the Royal Protection Command, they immediately take up a post in a civilian role in the Royal Household. Yeah. Some people say, well, yeah, that's because, you know, they've been there years, they're trusted police officers. No, hang on a minute. They should go through the same process in interviews like everyone else that is outside of the palace. There might be other people that have got much more skills and bringing to the table than that police officer. But because he is attributed to the Masonic influence, the Masonic Lodge, He's now got an upper hand. Now, this is how serious it is within the Metropolitan Police. Years ago, I've put this on my Twitter account. I was told, I got a call saying, listen, they're so worried about the Masonic influence within the Metropolitan Police that they've initiated a grass line, an informants line. So if anyone's concerned that fellow colleagues are Masons, they could make the call to the anti-corruption command and throw them under a bus and put their name in the loop, because the Met were worried about the influence that the Masonic Lodge has within the police for the leg up and, you know, getting jobs and this, that, and others. So you're bang on the money there. Also, what I will say, and I'm not accusing Lord Loughborough of being a Mason, but he's a titled Lord, and he was my commander at the relevant period. And a classic example was he retired one day as commander of the Royal Protection Command. Bearing in mind it was during the time when all this has happened with Andrew. He then became Master of the Household for the King the next day, where he's still now. You know, so that's again connection. Also, the Duke of Kent, I believe, is a Grand Master in the Masonic Lodge as well. So just to give you a bit of background, even the roles are in the Masons. So
do you believe that you know, Masonry goes right up to the top to Charles and is heavily down through, you know, Andrew, William?
Yeah. Listen, this is a historical sort of association, isn't it? Yeah, and it's got royal connections. So anyone who is part of that establishment, the Masonic establishment, are going to be loyal to fellow Masons, and especially you know, within the Royal Household Masonic Lodge is a very, very influential organisation. And don't forget, as you know, as press people yourself, that you know you'll get people that used to work with, or you know, there's press people that were on the other side of the fence suddenly join the press liaison for the palace, become press secretaries. When they were on newspapers, and now they're press, so they know all the tricks of the trade. So they will cherry pick people from the opposite side of the fence to come and work for them, because then they know all the tricks of the trade that they can then use back. Yeah. In terms of fighting a shitty story, pardon my French, a shitty story, you know, or something that they need to dilute down in, so it's not has as much of an impact on the royal family than it first did. Yeah. So you know, there's a lot of history and a lot of secrecy behind this organisation, but I've seen firsthand that it is a corrupt organisation in terms of when I was there as part of the police. I was asked to join it, I didn't. But as I said, officers were given exponential treatment if they were part of that unit. We saw that for ourselves, and I'm not the only one saying it. My colleagues said it, say it as well. You know, so yeah, I do believe that Masonic influence could well have played a part in what's gone on, and in terms of the covering up of evidence and stalling in terms of getting justice done for everyone.
And now my last question. Sorry, I could talk to you all night, Paul. I just think you're brilliant. But last question from me before I go is, we see that King Charles is head of the Church of England, and we are, well, before Charles, we were led to believe, you know, this was very important to the royal family, and Christian values were the kind of part of their DNA fabric. How much of the, you know, walk to Sandringham to the church and the video messages they do at Christmas, how performative is it? Because more and more what I hear is they are not a religious family, and this is, you know, utter BS we're being fed.
Yeah, I think don't forget all the speeches. Yeah, well, look, it's what that is for the public that have come out year in, year out to see them at Sandringham. So they perform sometimes they probably think, oh, do I really need to do this today? But they do it because it's for, like you said, it's for the public image. Yeah, that it's the royal family. It's tradition to see them at Sandringham, walk to the church, walk out, and all the rest of it, and the speech, you know, the Christmas speech, and all that sort of stuff. It's for the public benefit. It's not for their benefit. It's for our benefit in terms of to give us something to chomp onto, to keep this like ideal alive. That we're yes, Your Majesty, we're waiting for you to give us this speech, and thank you for letting us see you on Christmas Day. You know, you get all these crackpots. I'm sorry to have to say it, who stand out on Christmas Day waiting for them to come out. Why aren't you at home doing your own dinner? You know, sorting yourself out. Why are you standing out waiting for these to come out? You know, of a church. Get yourself home. But this is yeah, and what annoys me as well, I did the CNN interview the other day, and he didn't defend them. I mean, you know, it's fair enough for me, but I said about the victims, and like we've been banging on for 3 days about Andrew getting evicted from a 30-bedroom house. Like that was important. Why have we not been talking about victims and survivors of not only the Epstein, the monstrous stuff that's gone with Epstein, and the wider implications of the family members that have been affected, and people around the world? Because Prince Andrew has made himself a beacon of light for perverts, weirdos, and deviants all around the world when he defended his relationship with a paedophile. He's basically told every weirdo that it's okay if you're a paedophile, I'll still be your friend. And when you talk about sex offenders, and I've dealt with some of these utter scumbags, right? They're constantly trying to justify their actions. They're constantly trying to grab onto something to say, yeah, I'm justified. It's normal. We're trying to normalise it. And then you've got a man who's in a position like Prince Andrew was, telling us that, he's not sorry for the relationship. That, what are you see what I mean? So he's got no regard for that sort of thing. And then we had, like I said, 3 days of talking about a lodge. And I said to the reporter on CNN, I said, look, there's no mention of the victims or survivors, because that's what it's about at the end of the day. This is the focal point. It's a massive, massive abuse scandal with the upper echelons of society, and nothing's being done about it. We're kicking it around like a football, and nothing's actually substantially being done. And he turned around and he said to me, but the royal family did, unlike Prince Andrew, they did apologise in a statement, and when they released, and I'm thinking, hang on a minute, that's too little too late. You should have apologised when Andrew, first become implicated with Epstein in the way that he did. You should have apologised when he told a pack of lies and Emily make this show. Again, the royal family stood back and let it happen. They should have took control of it, and damage limitation would have been to meet them, hang him out to dry, cut the rot out, but they didn't. And now he's grown and grown and grown like a cancer up the royal chain of command, and this could end up as potentially, if there's a paperwork trail or an email trail back to the king, who knows? He might have to abdicate to save the monarchy and bring William in, because that William's been very quiet. So it could be a case of, look, the king's 78 now, he's suffering, he's got an illness, he's got his cancer treatment. This is a serious moment in and I said on there that it's a constitutional crisis knocking at the door of the monarchy, and it's got Prince Andrew's name written all over it. That's not going to change anytime soon until we, the people, see some form of justice. And if that means we see Andrew Gipping around.
Sorry, does it make you look back at what happened with Diana, knowing the deep rot, and think something doesn't add up about this?
Yeah, look, she had her own troubles, Princess Diana. I'm not saying she was a saint, but she had her own troubles. She was brought in as breeding stock. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but she was brought in purely to provide an heir to the throne. She didn't know the king, really. I think she was 20 and he was, 15 years older than her?
19. Yeah,
19 then. There you go. She was an innocent, you could see she was a shy, innocent girl at the time, and whatever happened in her life has happened. But the bottom line is, imagine the way she was treated by the royal household. We know what it's like now. Imagine back then in the 80s, not 90s, early 90s, what it was like before she passed away. The kind of attacks that the press office would have been lining up against her. The stories and all that sort of stuff. Doggy shush, right? So she's so I think back then, and that's why I think the boys, especially Harry's got an issue. I don't support Harry. I'm not either or, but I'm just saying he's got an attitude. He blames the press for a lot of it, but I think he has to look at his own family, to be honest with you. And I think if she hadn't got rid of her protection team, she would have still been alive today, and that's the sad thing about it.
Do you believe, though, that Paul, that there were any untoward, things happening whereby some of the letter agencies may have taken it into their own hands to wipe out what they deemed as a massive problem for the establishment?
No, it's probably because I'm an ex-police officer that I have to look at the practicalities in terms of I will only go if I've got evidence in front of me, I can analyse it and decide based on the evidence. I will comment, but something like that. Listen, keep an open mind. That's what I say. Everyone's got a point of view, but you have to go where the facts are. Yeah, question everything and believe nothing at the end of the day. And so. That is something that I've not really thought about. But if facts come to light, which they never will, that will err on that side. Then obviously, I'll be very surprised, because if that was the case, then we're talking deep, sort of, I don't know, all the cloak and dagger stuff that Shaun exposes all the time, but certainly, look, what's happened with Prince Andrew now is a hand grenade, and I think he's done the worst he could ever do to the royal family. Forget William and Harry and and Diana and all the stuff that's gone on with them. He's basically ruined it, and I don't think they'll ever recover from this saga. It's just been one failure to get a grip of this after another, to now to the point where there is a constitutional crisis in the offing. I think the reason that they've probably took his titles away now, because if he does get charged with anything, it's not going to say Prince Andrew on the charge sheet. It will just be a name. Imagine a charge sheet with Prince Andrew. That's bad enough. But with just his name, and it's still bad, but it doesn't say Prince Andrew. And I think that's what they're worried about. Again, the monarchy.
Paul, I wanted to ask you also, for example, you have.
Take care.
I just saw today that, I don't know if you saw this, Shaun, that it dropped, that the BBC showed a video of Andrew in 2019 bringing somebody into the palace, Buckingham Palace, while the Queen was there, which is a Bitcoin guy or whatever. And they were filming the whole thing. And Fergie got paid 1.4 million pounds because she became like their ambassador. I don't know how much Andrew got paid. But what I wanted to ask is, like, how can this be allowed? For the people in I don't know, in the UK, I cannot speak for the UK, but at least for the royal households that I did manage security and other stuff, there are rules. But clearly, I'm sure you guys have rules. There's a set of rules, but they were just ignored. They were not even looked at, because that would not be allowed. The Queen was in residence. And we go back to, what if this woman, just like the Chinese spy, they don't know if the Chinese men planted devices anywhere, because you guys did not follow them everywhere he went, or whenever one of Andrew's guests would come in, right? So what would you do now that this is coming out? The rules, do you think that they will look at the rules further, or they will actually do something about it and abide by them?
There's going to be there is probably a shake-up of the royal household underway, if it hasn't already happened. Security procedures will probably be tightened up, but look, the bad apple, which is Prince Andrew, has now been removed from the situation. That's where all the problems occurred, in terms of this what's going on there. This is where they started, and this is where we're still ongoing. So what they've tried to do now is cut that, like I said, cut that cancer out and get it out of the royal family, completely remove it, completely remove the titles, completely remove him from any sort of residency within London, and stick him out the way in Norfolk and Sandringham. And if there are, if he's got to answer to a criminal investigation, then so be it, straight public inquiry. But he's not in London. They're trying to distance themselves now from him. And are they hoping that this is going to be enough to appease the public? Well, it's not going to be. It's not going to be. I would go to the open of an envelope if it gave me the opportunity to drop truth bombs on him, because until he is held to account, actions, not only with his relationship, obviously, with Epstein and where else, but obviously I'm grabbing onto this criminal side of things in terms of the illegal, obtaining of information, if that's in fact what happened with his police officer. That's a bone that I'm not going to let go of, and I want to see what's going to play out now, what the police are going to do about it. I've been speaking to press that have been ringing me up, asking me for intel and asking me what the way forward is, and I've said to them, listen, just ask the Met Press office if this is still an inquiry, or is it now moved to a criminal inquiry? Yeah, because if it is moved to a criminal inquiry, then we know there's only one person really that's going to be in the frame, and that's Prince Andrew. So that is, we need to know what's going on. And I said to the press, you need to be all over them and watch every move they make, and make sure that it's open and transparent in terms of when they can release. Oh, she's an investigation, not going to tell us all the ins and outs of it, but they certainly can tell us if it's gone from, if it goes from just a general inquiry phase to now we're looking at criminal, a criminal inquiry, straight investigation, because that is massively significant. Yeah. So this is where I'm hoping that we're going to see some sort of result.
And, I wanted to ask you something because I had a friend of mine, I reached out to a solicitor friend of mine in the UK, and he said that it was very interesting that, if true, that Andrew is being housed in one of the king's private residences or states, right? And he told me that under the law, UK law, you cannot just break into the king's residence, even to arrest Andrew if you were to do that, because you would need the king's permission to do that. And by having the king house him there, it's a little bit of a barrier for the police, because as you see, the police is very shy and they don't like to embarrass. And the embarrassment of a royal, it weighs more than actual law, because they would have to ask permission to Charles to come and arrest Andrew at one of his private states. Why is this? I mean, and this is what do you think this is happening? Why wasn't he just told, go find your own place to live,
Yeah, I think, look, they've got him out of Royal Lodge as quickly as possible because of public opinion. It's going off in the public, and the royal family's opinion rating has gone down to 50%. It's probably gone down a bit lower since. And as soon as that started, as soon as I heard that, I was surprised. I thought, well, that's bad in any form. That is a bad state of affairs. And then the king's getting heckled about his brother while he's out doing official duties,
I saw that.
which is bad as well. So they've had to make some sort of move to sort of calm this down. Now, him being sent to Sandringham is just a place for him to stay, where he's off grid. He's not a target. People aren't keep going on about him staying in this Royal Lodge. He's in a private residence, so it's nobody's business effectively, because it's not coming out of the taxpayer's purse. Now, as opposed to him being arrested, I don't think that would be the case. I think, as I said, they will ask him to voluntarily attend the police station. And obviously at that stage, there's a possibility they may arrest him when he walks in, or they may just ask for a voluntary interview under caution, suspecting him of committing various offences, deception, misconduct offences, whatever it is. I've been at the job a while, but I know it's going to be somewhere in that area. And then I suggest he probably be bailed to come back, at which time the DPP, that's the top man in the law in this country who oversees CPS, will obviously be looking at that with other senior lawyers and decide what charges potentially they could hand down to him. And at which time, if he is charged, if he comes back on bail and is charged, then I can pretty much determine that it will be a guilty plea, get his 30% off, and probably looking at a suspended sentence for this issue of the asking the police officer to do unlawful checks. As I say, we need to see what other information, because the police will probably be in possession of they're obviously their own police inquiry stuff when it happened, so they will know what's gone on to a degree. They might even be waiting for their US counterparts to say, well, who was there and what was, looking at their systems and what they did, and then obviously the final blow, the fatal blow, would be if Prince Andrew, because we've got a lot of messages going back between Andrew and Epstein, right? The fatal blow would be if Andrew has received the information or the intelligence from his PPO innocently, because obviously his PPO has got his best interest at heart, he's thinking it's a potential threat, and Andrew has passed that information via email back to Epstein. Yeah, because that's obviously that's going to be the worst case scenario for Andrew. Yeah. As bad enough as it is that he's obviously asked for this information for his own purpose, for his own benefit. Yeah, he's lied to obtain something for his own benefit, and this something is information. Yeah, which is obviously police intelligence, which is subject to data protection and obviously all kinds of rules and regulations, which he knew he'd be breaking when he asked him. So yeah, I can't see him being arrested. If that's extreme, because of who he is, there isn't really a need to go and arrest him. He could just go with his lawyer to the police station and be formally interviewed.
And now that a lot of information is coming out, especially now this little video, and this is just one little clip that we know of that BBC released, that Fergie made 1.4 million pounds. Yeah. I wonder if people now can request to make their finances public, because I am almost sure, this is just my opinion, that she paid no income tax on any of that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Andrew Lowney, who wrote the book entitled, has put in so many freedom of information requests to the government in relation to a lot of Andrew's finances, especially when he was trade envoy, and he's just been blocked. He's been blocked on everything. So, you know, there's a key indication there that there's something that they don't want, you know, to be made public. But Andrew's fighting hard for it. I've got a lot of respect for Andrew. You know, he's kicked the doors in with that book. And
Andrew Lowney, by the way.
Andrew Lowney, yeah. Sorry. Yes. Yeah. Don't cut that, Shaun. So it looks like I'm saying that. I've got a lot of respect for Prince Andrew because I'll get killed, mate.
Yeah. Paul went to Andrew Lowney's book launch.
Oh, okay, that's cool. Yeah, Andrew's amazing. I wanted to ask you. A lot of people. I just wanted your opinion on this.
Yeah.
A lot of people are saying, "Oh, poor Andrew. You know, like taking away his titles is enough." And you know, why aren't the other people being also named? Why only him? They should just let him go. And from my point of view, it's like, are we really at the point where losing titles is a big deal? When this man has done a lot more to these women, some of them are dead, have lost so much in life, and they're still being vilified. I mean, where do you stand on that? I mean, do you agree that it's okay, let him go and live in Sandringham and at the little mansion he has, with rather than 100 employees or staff, he will only have like 10. You know, that's poor guy.
No, I it makes my blood boil because we haven't had, you know, and we come back. It's not so much for us as citizens of the UK. It's, again, it comes back to people who've been affected by this kind of crime, that he's not been held to account for his relationship and stuff that he's done, and he's not properly come out and apologise properly. You know, that could have been something. It could have been some sort of way to you know, to apologise. Just say, look, I've made a mistake. Put your hands up and just be honest and say, I've been bad. I've done some bad things, and I'm sorry, and I regret what I've done. None of that. He's just hidden and kept his gob shut for 6 years, right? Which is to me, it shows that what the man is. Yeah, it shows what the man is. Yeah, he's just a coward. He's not no honour. You know what? How can you say I did the honourable thing to go and visit a paedophile? I mean, this is, you know, how thick can you be? You know, I did the honourable thing by going to cut my relationship off with a convicted paedophile. As if we're all going to go, oh, yeah, no, I can see it now. Sorry, I understand why you went, you know? I mean...
But why do you think that's happening, though? Why do you think, for example, that Fergie... and this is a very unpopular opinion I have. Maybe at the beginning, I would have blamed the former prince. But now, I blame the government because the government has enabled this kind of behavior. And this kind of behavior, when it's not stopped, it only grows. I know from personal experience. So... they have, at this point, by Andrew, when you don't stop it, when you it just grows, especially with certain people. We do see it with Harry. We do see it with Meghan. We have seen it with Charles. You know, when the police caution him about Savile, Peter Ball, and other people, they don't listen, and the government does nothing.
I mean, it's just gone rogue. Prince Andrew's just gone absolutely rogue, and it's just spiraled out of control. But like you said, who knew what when, in terms of government, members of the royal family, and security services? There's three different organisations there. Now, you're not telling me that none of these knew what was going on with Prince Andrew. You're not telling me that none of them were flagged up any issues in relation to his relationship with Epstein, the Chinese spy that was friends with him for years before he got, outed. You know, all these things you would think, and as I come back to it before, should have been looking at him because he was representing the UK as trade envoy. He's in an ideal position to be blackmailed, and you would think the security service would have a cloak around him of protection. Not only his protection officers, but the Secret Service, you would think, would be all over him to make sure that he's not susceptible to blackmail or corruption, which in fact he is on both, and he's not hanging around with people that are going to bring the royal family or the country into disrepute, which he was. Case in point, Epstein. So there's questions that all these people at some stage should have to answer. But like you said, is the government got an appetite for a public inquiry? No. Does the royal family want one? No. Do the Secret Service want one? No. Why? Because they're all going to end up being culpable for the mess we're in there. And so I think what they're going to try and do is tidy this up and get him shafted on a couple of charges, criminal charges. I think there's enough evidence to hold a public inquiry based on the fact that scandal is one of the criteria, massive scandal within this country, which this is of epic proportions, and that government ministers under the Inquiries Act 2005 have the power to organise an inquiry and say what the length and depth of that inquiry be, so how long it's going to go for and how far you're going to look into it. That's not being done, so I'm hoping, and my fingers are crossed, that we're going to see some form of criminal action against him, albeit it's only for lying to his police protection officer. But you know what, something's better than nothing right now, and that could well open up the doors for further inquiries, in terms of we now got a basis for a public inquiry. So that's what I'm hoping for. I'm not going to sit back. I'm going to keep going out there and putting the boot in until I see a result at the end of the day. It's water off the duck's back. What I have seen, though, the trials are coming out to play now, because Prince Andrew and the royal family are on the ropes. So all of a sudden, all these little smurfs are coming out, being sent by the royal household to dig the dirt and say, question Virginia's Euphrates story, and she's this and she's that, and I'm getting it now. I don't really care. I've been to prison. What are you going to do? I don't care. So but you see, I'm starting to see that now. It's become prevalent over the last few days on Twitter and on things that are being said on
people are stupid.
Online. So it's weird, but I think we're close. We just got to keep pushing, and anyone listening out there, you got to listen. You can't let it go. They're relying on us to just go off on another tangent and be happy with the fact he's had his titles taken away and he's been kicked out of a 30-bedroom mansion. No, we're not happy with that.
With you also, because I know for a fact that because I used to deal with a lot of police protection officers for the royal households, and they would tell me that they would hate working for people. Somebody was a bully or very unpopular, somebody like Andrew right now, because the risk factor not only applies to the principal, but to them. People forget that. So, for example, when the police protection officers went with Andrew to Epstein's in New York to pretend that they were not friends anymore, that was also a risk for you guys. Even something that dumb, dumb. And I've always, and I love the armed forces and people like that. So, for example, when Eaton lied and cheated to get Harry the minimum grade so he can get into Sandhurst, that was a huge scandal. That was hush hush, or when he was flown out of that idiot allowed to be in the army, and he went to Afghanistan in order to whitewash a scandal that he had back home, put other soldiers at risk. Because unlike when you go on the field with people that, like Andrew, yes, you went to Jeffrey Epstein's place, it's in New York, but you could have been a target because there were so many things going on around Epstein around that time that, that increased the risk level. I mean, people don't understand that. And this is the thing that's quite shocking to me, all these scandals that are allowed. I mean, where was the government stopping Andrew from saying, you can't, if you go there, you're going without the police protection officers? Where was that accountability? Where was that reining him in?
But what you just said there is transparency, accountability, and you should be open to the public to question what's going on, and they're none of those things, And Andrew Land, that's Andrew Land's words. He said in a speech at the book launch. So they're not open, they're not transparent, they're not accountable, and this is the problem we've got, and we can see that now from the way they've acted in this matter, with the Epstein, Andrew, Maxwell, mess. You'd think that someone would say, right, let's just get this together. But like I said to you, it's clear to me, as a normal, reasonable person would come to the same conclusion, that obviously there's people in all three of those establishments, the royal family, the government, and the security service, that are going to be in the frame, because it's impossible and inconceivable to think that no one in any of those three organisations knew what was going on with Prince Andrew, and nothing was flagged up. That's impossible. So I think that's a can of worms, and will we get to the bottom of it? Hopefully in our lifetime, probably not. But listen, we've just got to hang on and hope that we get some form of justice, and this scumbag who's the poster boy for every deviant, paedophile, and sex case around the world gets served up, and he gets what he deserves, and that's justice. You know, if he gets arrested and he gets charged, then at least that's something for us. And it's a warning signal to the people that haven't been caught yet. Listen, he's one down, and however many you got to go, we're coming for you. But again, no one else has been thrown under the bus yet with regards to the FBI and what they're doing out there. You know, we've got Andrew. This is our mess. So if there's Americans that are involved in this, then they should be dealt with, you know, rightly so. But this is unfortunate. This is a British mess. This man is you know, one of our senior members of our royal family. You know, he's damaged the country. He's damaged our reputation. He's a toxic asset to this country. Never mind about the royal family. You know, it's called untold damage. Untold damage. You know, and so we need to get a grip of this as a nation, as a you know, as a society, and say, listen, you know, think about all the people that have been affected around the world. This is a focal point. He's a focal point now, right? So if we don't deal with him properly and firmly, and you know, hold him to account, then we're a joke. We don't care about anyone, do we? We can't. You know what's going on. So we can't individually. We can't do something, but collectively we can. And I suggest listen, if we don't get what we want, then it's going to have to be boots on the ground and a call to arms. We're going to have to start protesting. You know. Listen, I'll be up there. I'll take a banner. I'll get up there. You know, because if they're not going to listen and they're not going to do what they should do, then it is what it is, isn't it?
I know from a very good source that Fergie is planning her move to California, and that she's planning a sit down with Oprah.
Right.
And I've actually started seeing now the articles come out and say that King Charles is going to rue the day that he didn't fall subject to Fergie's blackmail, because it is part of me that I believe that she's been blackmailing the royal family in everything. I mean, they're not very smart, but I do think she's very evil and cunning. And she's a rat. She will survive. How do you think we should deal with her? Because I think she's been involved in quite a bunch of shady stuff.
Yeah.
That it's in fact, when I interviewed Andrew Lowney, I didn't want to talk about Andrew. My first interview with him was about Fergie, because I know there's a lot of shady stuff. And what do you think is going to happen to her? Should she walk away, or should she be made to answer?
Yeah, again, made to answer. Again, we've got something potentially for Andrew to answer in terms of a criminal offence, but we've got nothing on Fergie. Listen, when he married her, he didn't marry a woman. He married a debt. Yeah, she was a spender, and that's her remit. I will spend your money. I need money. And if you look at history, you know, it's just spend. Look at the fake shape, trying to get £500,000 off of a newspaper sting. Yeah.
Why wasn't she arrested then? That is a criminal.
I don't know. But that was to facilitate access to Prince Andrew. So that can't be the only time. How do we know they weren't going to get half each? How do we know that obviously he wasn't in on it as well? How do we know that she hasn't been doing that whilst he was a trade envoy, and that she was using his business, his role as trade envoy to secure meetings and business deals that lined their pockets under the guise of him being a trade envoy? We don't know that. That's why we need to look into it. That's why Andrew has tried to get done freedom of information request in regards to his financial dealings and you know, his expenses claims and all that, to see if there's any improprieties, which I suggest there's going to be. So you know.
So you think she'll walk away free?
I think so. And what offences is anyone accusing her of?
Didn't she introduce Andrew to Epstein? She was the one, according to Ghislaine. And I mean, I just think she hasn't been investigated. People have been so focused on Andrew that this is a woman whose email was leaked saying, Epstein, I'm going to bring my girls and we're going to celebrate your release. I mean, an Epstein email said that he's been supporting her for 15 years financially.
I know. She hasn't got a moral compass. Let's be honest. It's not. It doesn't need resetting. She just needs one, and she hasn't. You know what I mean? She's just a leech. She's a leech, and unfortunately, she's been proven to be a paedophile sympathiser, just like Prince Andrew has. And there's no coming back from this. There's no coming back from this. So, you know, she needs to go away quietly and get her head down. No one wants to see her. You know, obviously, there's going to be people out there going to want to see a heart-to-heart interview on their side of the story. Well, we've got the side of the story that matters. It's the emails. Yeah. It doesn't matter what she says now. We've got the emails. We know what she's truly about. And so we're not going to, I personally would not pay any attention to what she says in any interview she does from now on in. Yeah. We've got what we need to know. She's lied and lied again. And it's to line her own pockets. That's all that she's been about. All right. So that's just that. She's just a female version of Prince Andrew to a degree. Yeah. So I really let her go to America. Good riddance to her. Good riddance.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that people have been saying, because when you were in the royal family, were you around the time around, the then Prince Charles, Prince of Wales?
Yeah, but I saw him every now and again, but he lived at St James's Palace where he does now. So I would see him every now and again, and we'd come in to meet his mum. But he wasn't, and also when he had his offices at Buckingham Palace, like all the other members of the royal family had offices. So they would have their private secretaries and all that work out at these offices, and they would have meetings. The people would come to Buckingham Palace to have meetings with the various, members of the royal family. So I would see him then, but I wasn't on a close basis like I was with, obviously, Prince Andrew and the Queen and Prince Philip.
That is, I'm shocked. I mean, so much I want to ask you, but I don't want to take that down. No, but I'm just shocked because so much, at least from my experiences in other royal households, that I'll just give you a little example. There was, when I was in Central America, one of the crown princes came to visit, and he brought his girlfriend, the then girlfriend, and it got found by the authorities because they still go through customs, just not go through with everybody. That the girlfriend was bringing the white powder.
Oh,
and yeah, so we say it's the girlfriend because we didn't want to blame the the crown prince. So I remember the authorities. Everybody was like, "Oh my God, what are we going to do?" And the country, because it's a very very wealthy country, said, "Oh well, we're going to give you more money in aid if you." Just, we'll take away the white powder and just, it wasn't even reported in the police because there's a special force in countries for VIPs, that deals with that.
Yeah.
It wasn't even reported. The girl, they just took the powder away and the country got more aid from the country.
Yeah. With this, Prince Andrew, I bet he wished he'd lived in a country like that.
Well, he kind of has been. He
kind
of has been in the UK. He's been getting away with everything. And I mean, can you imagine this little clip? This little clip in 2019, guys. This is this is not even in 2001. This is 2019.
Yeah, yeah.
The Queen was alive, dying of cancer. It's so sickening.
Yeah. Well, hopefully that in the coming days and weeks, we might see see something positive happen. That we can celebrate. I'm not going to get my case of beers in yet, but I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful.
Paula, we're gonna have to let Paul go soon, so I'm gonna let you go now, Paula, because I've got a couple of questions to ask Paul before he goes. Huge thank you for coming on.
Bye, Paula.
Thank you, Paula.
Bye,
cheers. Bye. And Paula and Lauren's links, if you want to support them, are in the description box below this video. Huge thank you for doing this, Paul. Now, so many people watched you on 60 Minutes. It's got millions of views. I just want to ask the viewers, did you see Virginia's brother on 60 Minutes? It's just come out. I just watched it today, and he's giving his reaction for the first time, his public reaction to the allegations against their dad. And he's also talking about Prince Andrew. So I'm going to get Paul's thoughts on it. If you did see Virginia's brother, put a 1 in the chat. If you've not seen what Virginia's brother said, put a 2 in the chat, because I'm going to put it on the screen right now. I'm going to play it for Paul, and we're going to get his reaction to it. So let me just find the video real quick. Let me see. Could this be the end for Prince Andrew? I think this is it. Yep, here it is. Let me get that on the screen. 1 second. There we go. It's on the screen. Let me make it nice and big, and we will get the volume up. Volume's on. Yeah, make it big. All right, here we go.
Ray's brother, Sky Roberts, and sister-in-law, Amanda, welcome Andrew's latest humiliation, but believe it's well overdue.
I know that he's a royal by blood, but he's not a royal by his actions. This is just the first start. This is affirmation for Virginia. This is affirmation to say she was a truth teller, but it's not necessarily justice. Justice would be taking the next step and putting him where he needs to go, which is behind bars.
So that's what you want to see. That's justice, that he goes to jail.
Anybody who is being implicated in this cover-up, whether it's a royal cover-up or a U.S. cover-up, needs to be put where they need to go, which is behind bars.
What do you think about what the Virginia's brothers said so far, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, listen, right, so, yeah, I mean, look, if there's anyone been involved in any form of cover-up of serious offences, then there's only one place for them to go, because this is a serious matter. Like I said, we're talking about sex trafficking, we're talking about real victims, we're talking about pain and misery and a life sentence. You know, unfortunately, Virginia's taken her life, and I would suggest that's all to do with what's gone on in her life, which is a very sad fact. So, yeah, look, if there's evidence to prove that could get through the threshold test for a criminal, case, then, mate, they all need to be served up, and they all need to grip their arrows, and they all need to take responsibility for their actions. So, yeah, 100%.
All right, I'll play a little bit more.
Andrew's public downfall started in 2019 with his pompous and at times preposterous responses to Emily Maitlis's extraordinary interview for the BBC.
Bonkers, isn't it? Just crazy town. Let me put, I'll put the brother back on again, one sec.
Things should happen to him that should have happened to Prince.
Yeah, so he's talking now about the allegations against the father. I've almost finished the book, and the allegations against their own father, what he did to Virginia, some of the most disgusting.
Is for you. I mean, what do you believe should happen to your father?
For me to not come out and tell you the same thing should happen to him that should have happened to Prince Andrew would be remiss of me as a basic human being. And it's so hard to say as his son, as his child, to say, you know what? You should be publicly shamed. You should be shameful of what you did.
You know, how poignant is it that there does seem to be this groundswell of belief in what Virginia had to say and anger at what she had to suffer? How sad is it that that is being experienced after her death?
Part of us just wanted to call her and tell her that the truth is out for you to see, and the world believes you when they didn't believe you before. And that is just so bittersweet. And there is this chapter in the book where she says, I just want to make a small dent in this huge world. And when all these things came to surface with Prince Andrew, I wanted to tell her, man, you broke it. You broke the system, and it's such a beautiful thing. And you just made the biggest impact.
Paul, if Virginia were alive today, what would you say to her?
I would say the fight's not over. You've got to keep going until every single scumbag involved in this is behind bars. You've got to keep going. You've got the momentum there. Yeah. You've made a massive, massive hole in this, and you've just got to keep pushing. And the momentum was on her side. This is what's so sad. The momentum was on her side. She was getting more and more support, and unfortunately, she just, it came to a very tragic end. But listen, in memory of her, everyone involved in this who was supporting her needs to continue. The fight's not over. Yeah, the fight is not over. It's not going to be over until these people are unmasked and they're held to account in a court of law in front of a jury of their peers. And until that's done, this is going to go on and on and on. I think now, with the way Prince Andrew's happened, it's stirred the fire in everyone's bellies again. Look, we can see someone's starting to initiate to be initially being held to account. His silence is deafening. His silence is just smacks of guilt. Yeah. So people around the world need to stand up. People in high society, there's a warning sign. If you've done wrong, people are not going to just sit back anymore. And I think those in positions of authority are now seeing that there's a massive earthquake that's happened. Do they want to be in line to be roped into any sort of cover-ups? That's the thing, But obviously, we need to get over the hill with Prince Andrew. Let's take him out, and then obviously, go for whoever else is in line with evidence, obviously, and hold them to account as well.
Indeed, well said. And this is such a fast-moving story, Paul. We appreciate you coming on twice. in 1 week. If people have missed the other parts, they're all in the description box. Do you have anything to say, Paul, to the viewers who've been with us here for 2 hours now? Anything in conclusion?
As I said, listen, it's all about, the focus is on victims of abuse. So let's not forget that, right? It's all about people, survivors and victims. It's all about what these people go through on a daily basis, yeah? So this is like the focal point right now for every survivor. This is a man, in a position that Prince Andrew was, who is defending his relationship with a convicted paedophile. So he, in doing that, like I said, is insulted and disrespected every single person who has been affected by abuse around, and their families. So listen, we can't stop. We've got to keep the pressure on. Andrew's on the ropes. Let's finish the job.
And put a 1 in the chat, viewers, if you'd like to see Paul come back and do a part 4. And Paul,
I feel like
I'm going to
Rocky. This isn't Rocky. This isn't Rocky.
It might all be different next week. It's going so fast.
Yeah,
we'll see what happens.
Tell me about it.
But,
listen, Shaun, thanks for having me on, mate. I appreciate it.
And all of Paul's links in the description box. His his book. Check them out. Thank you, Paul. I'm going to let you go and close the show. Cheers.
Take care, Shaun. Take care, everyone.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Well, guests, viewers, thank you for all of the questions that have come in that we weren't able to answer, to ask Paul, because we had so much to cover today, but we will try and get Paul back for another part to answer all those questions. I've got almost 50 questions starred right now. We do have another show in an hour on Bohemian Grove. Actually, yeah, at 7 o'clock on Bohemian Grove. Thank you for all the ones coming in. And if you want to support our co-host Lauren's links are down there, and Paula M's links are all in the description box. Huge thank you. And Baby Ziggy is coming to say goodbye to everybody. Baby Ziggy, look, Baby Ziggy, whoa! You're gonna say goodbye to everybody. And if you didn't see earlier in the week, I did finally got the 1 million subscriber plaque. It arrived this week. So yeah, how big is Baby Ziggy getting, folks? Look, there you are, love. Look. Say bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye. All right. Bohemian Grove in 1 hour. Check it out. And if you missed what we did with Lionel last